Hello, hello. Good evening out there, hockey world. We are live in the Up My Hockey Facebook group. We're Up My Hockey page, and also on my live channel for a conversation with Brooks Christiensen. Brooks, welcome so much to the show, and we are speaking with the GM of the Salmon Silverbacks tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason.
Hey man, no problem, no problem. I thought he'd be an amazing guest. Well, for a few reasons. One, obviously, I'm local to this area, and I know a lot of people that follow me are, Western Canadian. So BCHL is of importance to them, either from a fan's perspective or from a perspective that they have a child that wants to play in the league. So I thought it'd be interesting to chat with you. You're a league and represent a league that a lot of players want to play in, and there's a lot of questions about, hey, how do I do that? How do I make that dream happen? So I thought we'd get into that. But there's also been a lot of interesting stuff that's been happening lately, just with your league in and of itself. Leaving the, what would you call it? Like the governance of Hockey Canada. Would that be the right way to put it?
Yeah, not leaving Hockey Canada, but the Canadian Junior Hockey League as a whole is basically the discussion right now. So yeah, it's not a small thing, but at the same time, it's maybe not as big as what people make it out to be at this time.
Gotcha. So yeah, definitely want to cover that. So welcome everybody who's here. By all means, say hi. As always, I encourage questions and interaction. I know that there's a lot of you out there that are very curious about these things. I'll do my best to ask the questions that I feel are relevant, but I know there might be other things out there. So at any point in the conversation, please let us know if you're liking what you're hearing, or if you want to ask something of yourself. And Brooks says he would be more than happy to help with that. So by all means, get your questions in. Again, we're here with Brooks Christiensen, the GM of the Salmon Silverbacks. And Brooks, you have an interesting story just of yourself, just when we were touching base the other day, about how you got to the position. And why don't you tell us a little about that? Where did you play your hockey, first of all? Because you did play a little bit, correct? And then how did you get into where you are right now?
Yeah, I played a short stint. I mean, I played 4 years of junior B. I started in Princeton, and then I had a short little time in Manitoba, and then I finished off in Revelstoke for my last year. And I'm from Salmon originally, so it's definitely a unique situation for myself of being in the position I am for the hometown junior team that I've obviously grown up and being a part of. We were a billet. I was a stick boy when I was younger for the team, so it's kind of a full 360 on how things have come, but it's a great opportunity. I really enjoy what I'm doing here now, and obviously being in a community that I'm so fond of, it's pretty easy to enjoy it.
Oh my gosh, that's wild! So you're a stick boy for the Salmon Silverbacks, and then ends up being the general manager. Well, you said too, like, so you obviously had, I mean, you had the bug. I mean, you played it, right? You did it for 4 years. You left, and then was it always something that you knew you wanted to pursue, hockey in some regard, or did you come back to it, or how did that transition work?
Yeah, I think I took about a year and a half away from hockey. I mean, I would go to a couple Silverback games. I started in sales, and I was doing finance at the time in the automotive industry. So it was kind of a little combination of, I was more of just a fan and stepped away. My brother was still playing junior hockey at the time, so I was able to watch him and go to a lot of his games. And then I think it was about a year and a half to almost 2 years after playing that I got kind of approached with Brandon West, who was the head coach at the time, the Silverbacks, and Troy Mick, who was the GM, and started talking with them. I think I helped out for a spring camp, and then the following year kind of offered a kind of the second assistant coach role, and really what started that and just got me back around the rink, and it kind of just escalated from there. And here we are. I think it's about 6 years later now, so it's definitely an interesting journey for sure.
Yeah, that's super wild. So you came back as an assistant coach, and then what did you like most about that experience that kept you coming back?
I think it was just relating to guys, I was never like an assistant coach that would have, the room to yell at guys or, get mad. It was more just trying to be there for the players as a kind of an assistant role of just whatever they needed for somebody to lean on and chat with. I specialized more in face-offs and power play. So it was really working with guys kind of on a one-on-one basis on that. And just, really enjoyed just being there for any guy's needs and whatever it was. If it was, maybe they weren't scoring or getting points, or, just struggling just in their game itself. It was pretty neat for me to kind of start with that, but I kind of knew that coaching was never my forte. It wasn't something that I wanted to be a head coach at one point in time. I really enjoyed the business side, and that's kind of what transitioned me over to the position that I'm now in at this time.
Awesome. So you rose up organically. We talked a little bit before. You had a pretty good mentor there in Troy Mick, who's been around the game as a player and as a a back office guy. So you had some tutelage from him, I assume, and then Troy left, and you, the ownership saw something in you and kept you around and moved you up.
Yeah, it was. Working beside Troy was phenomenal. I mean, I learned so much from the guy. He's a brilliant hockey mind, and just his passion for the game is next to none. So I think I transitioned after my second year of assistant coach. I switched over to the marketing side and really started to focus more on the business side of things. And then basically, as we kept moving forward, when Troy left, I had a pretty good relationship with the ownership at that time, and they offered me operations manager, and so I did that for about a year before taking over the GM role and really making my focus more on the hockey side and business, of course. But it's kind of just all gelled together, and every day is different. And that's what I love about this job.
Cool. So do you have any goals, dreams, hopes after the Silverbacks? Is this something you'd like to pursue at whether a major junior or NHL level someday?
Well, I think it's pretty hard to say no to that question, right? I mean, it's something I never thought that would be even something in a category that I would be able to talk about. But talking with quite a few different hockey minds, it's definitely something that's crossed my mind more and more. I mean, I have a really good opportunity here in Salmon. Our ownership's great to me. We've got a lot of unfinished business. Last year we started to get on a roll before COVID shut us down. So really want to make an impact here in Salmon before looking any further. But I think it'd be pretty hard to turn down any of those two leagues. They're both fantastic leagues, so it'd be really good to get to work with that as well.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, you have a young yourself. I mean, I believe you're 30. Hope you don't mind me saying that. And I think your head coach is 32. And I think that's really great to have that youth. And it sounds interesting to say youth, but I mean, obviously your players are in their teens and maybe 20s. So they're younger than you, yet you're still young for the business, and a lot of time to move on from where you're at right now. But of course, you got to serve where you are the best you can in order to do that.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things that some of us players lose track of sometimes. We're so busy thinking about the big goal and the big dream that we lose track of actually where we're at, and we have to kick some butt at that level to get anywhere else. So I'm sure it's the same in your spot. That's great. I love the fact that you were stick boy, now the GM, and in that seat though. I mean, and we are, again, for those of you who just joined in, with Brooks Christiensen here of the Salmon Silverbacks GM. Let's talk a little bit about the BCHL, because it's in an interesting spot right now. That's been announced that you guys are leaving, as you said, the collective body of the junior A in Canada to go independent and run the BCHL. Would the name stay the same? Is that the plan?
Yeah. There's a lot of things that won't change. I mean, our format and just in general won't change at all. When I took over 3 years ago as governor and sat on the board of directors with our league, it was amazing what Chris Hebb, our commissioner, kind of stepped in at that time. It was, I think, his first year was my first year, and really just wanted to mold us to be our own business and be able to promote ourselves. And so, it's been a discussion for ongoing years. And at this point in time, it's the Band-Aid's being pulled off, and there's a lot of discussion behind that. Even I don't know what's going on there, but I think it's at the time where we're pretty independent, and our league's done a great job. Even looking through COVID here, what we've been able to handle and accomplish. We had our guys back months before the Western League was even, and obviously that came down to dollars and cents for ownership. But it's just, there's a lot of pieces that we feel that we can finally just say, okay, the BCHL is can handle it and do it ourselves, kind of thing.
And so is it then official? This is happening next season. You guys will be independent. Is that 100% done?
I don't know if I can even say where that's at. I'm not too in the loop on that. I know we have a AGM meeting here with our league coming up. I think it's in the end of May, so I'm sure there'll be more discussion there as to what that's going to be. I know there's a lot of pieces that come with that as well. So I think at this time there's been still some discussions back and forth with the CJHL, but I'm just going to be sitting waiting patiently to hear what the next kind of steps are.
Sure. Would you mind walking us through like what you, maybe the advantages of doing something like this, and why the owners are thinking that this is a good move?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I kind of touched on just, being able to kind of run our own kind of league itself, and being able to make our own rules that work for our market. I mean, you look at across, let's say, I think it's 10 different provinces or 10 different leagues that we have. And, really, when you look at it, we're kind of in a different, I guess you guys say, situation than most leagues. And, we really pride ourselves on, what we do to move guys to the NCAA and move them on to scholarships. And so I think that's where we feel our value is, us as a brand we've built it up pretty strong, and we want to continue that. And I think this is just the next step that we have to do in order to get that brand there.
Gotcha. Well, I guess what freedoms were you allowed? I mean, I don't have the recruiting rule book in front of me, or like what you guys are allowed or not allowed to do right now under the current format. But I assume this opens you up to do different things, which would be one of the advantages. What are those different things that you'd be able to do, or that you won't have to abide by, I guess, if this goes through?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, I guess, would be territory, like the 16, 17-year-olds from out of province. I know, and obviously Europeans, that's another big one, and imports from the States, kind of all those categorized in that same area. So there hasn't been any discussion, I know, from at least that I've been a part of what that's going to look like. I know I've had a lot of advisors reaching out, a lot of, parents asking, okay, what's this going to do? At the end of the day, we're still playing 60 minutes of hockey every night. And until I know further and until it's announced that's pretty much all that I can, I guess, say at this point in time and know what's happening.
Right. So the composition of the roster could potentially change. That would be one of the things that would change.
Yeah, I think it's pretty, when you look at across, you can see that, most of our 16, 17-year-olds are BC born, players. So it's really making sure that, we keep obviously the focus in BC, but also open the opportunity up for other players to be able to come into our league.
Gotcha. So as it is right now, you are forced to have a certain component of BC born and bred talent on the roster?
Yeah, so our rules right now in the BCHL is that we have to have 5 BC players from BC. What they can be 16, they can be 20 years old. We just have to have five have the BC province attached to them. So, for us, I think we've got 6 right now. So, and I know in past years we've had more. Sometimes we've had, just the minimum of 5. It just really comes down to how your roster's laid out. And it's always when you're going through your recruit bracket, you're making sure that you've got those in the future, that you're not all of a sudden run into where you only have 2 1 year. You really want to make sure, if anything, you've got more. You never know what happens during years, right?
Right. And that would be the same then for like the AJ? I mean, they have to have 5 Alberta players on their teams. Is that accurate?
I believe that's right. Yeah, I'm not too familiar what exactly the Alberta Junior Hockey's rules and regulations are, but I think that's kind of standard across the board for at least the next couple provinces over, kind of thing.
Gotcha. And then what are the allowances for Europeans or for US players as it sits right now?
So we're not allowed any Europeans currently. At least in my time in the BCHL, we haven't been in. I think years back, maybe around 10 years ago, you could have 1 or 2. I know previously your imports also counted as out of province players. They counted towards your import count as well. But you're allowed 5 imports. So we're allowed 5 American players basically to join our league. And they have to be basically 18 to 20 years old currently. And then you have a max of 20-year-olds as well that you have. So, if you're a 20-year-old American, you hit basically 2 kind of boxes that you have to work with.
Gotcha. So then, yeah. So if you guys left, then maybe you could have less BC players potentially, or you could have more US players. Like you might be able to open up the net on where you get your players from and what the composition looks like.
Yeah, I'm sure there's, I'm sure especially our commissioner and the league is doing a lot of thinking there. I mean, I know the one kind of conversation we have is, in no way do you want to go less BC players. I mean, I think it's pretty important, being the BCHL, that you have players. I mean, we're fortunate enough, we have one local on our team that we signed just right after Christmas, actually, as a 16-year-old. And I know we've got a couple recruits for next year, even that are in the Okanagan area. So to me, I think it's important that we have those BC players. It's, we're the BCHL, we're in BC. Why not bring in the best players from our province here? And so it's something that, at least I know when we look at recruiting, it's close to home. It's easy to get out to Kelowna, Vernon, Kamloops, right, and watch games right away.
Yeah, I think you guys are in a good market for that, obviously, because there is a lot of local talent in this area. Maybe harder potentially for teams like on the island or something, right, to have that homegrown type talent there. But I know, just from me being from Vernon and around this area, I know there's always a natural desire to have local players be a part of the team, because they are a part of the community and it keeps the community active. And it's really good stewardship for the community itself, right? As far as marketing is even concerned, from a business standpoint, right? Like, you want to have local players. It just makes sense. obviously you don't want to force feed your organization if the talent isn't there, but I mean, it seems like BC's producing some pretty good talent compared to, compared to other places. So I'm glad to hear you say that, because obviously my boys are coming up through the ranks too. And
Absolutely.
we'd all love to see our kids stay closer to home than have to go farther away. So there's a question from one of the Facebook users here who says, do you see Wenatchee joining the league again next year? Has that been part of the discussions?
Yeah, so they're still a part of our league right now. They still have a seat at the table. It's basically just with the border being closed is the only reason why they had to take the hiatus of a year. But I mean, they're a great organization, great partner with the league, and so I know there's no conflict there. Just getting that border back open so they can join us again and be a part. I mean, they're a very good organization to play against and to go down there. I know there's been lots of good things to come from the Wenatchee organization joining the BCHL.
So those poor guys just sit there and they're not able to play anybody because they're the only U.S. team, correct?
Yeah, they. I haven't heard too much of what's been happening lately. I know they were just practicing basically as a group and trying to get some exhibition games when they could down there. I know that I think obviously in Wenatchee they were shut down as well for a bit, so they didn't get ice until I think like late October as well. So it's kind of a combination. They've gone through a lot of things, but I know that Bliss and Clarkey, they're the head coach and GM, are doing a great job of what they can do right now.
All right. Yeah, so if you guys just joining, we're sitting with Brooks Christiensen, the GM of the Salmon Silverbacks, discussing all things BCHL. How has this impacted this year? One, I think I'd like to talk about your current players. So like your team as it stands now. I know some have been committed to, they kind of know where they might be going. Others are still looking for scholarships. How has the mood been around the locker room, and what are colleges and recruiters doing right now? Are they contacting you? Are they trying to ask for practice tape? Or I mean, what does that whole climate look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we look back when I think it was the end of November when we got shut down. I mean, we had a meeting as a staff right away and said, okay, we need to come up with a plan of what things are going to look like until we get back playing. And at that time, we thought it was a couple of weeks. We didn't think it was going to be, what was it, been 3-4 months now, I think, at this point. So, we really focused on development, whether that was in the gym or on the ice. And so we put together a plan, and kudos to our coaching staff. They've done a phenomenal job of keeping our guys engaged, making it fun. We filmed pretty much every practice for the first, I think, 2.5 months, whether that was at that time we could do scrimmages or we could do small area games, or it was just straight skills. We filmed that, and we were sending out to any schools that we were talking with, and whether it was myself getting a call from an NCAA team or Tyler or Carter, our coaches, really our biggest focus was getting out any content to those schools that needed it at the time. I know we had a couple guys kind of right on that edge of getting a scholarship, and their biggest thing is they want to watch games, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you need to see games in order to see these guys perform, and that's why this was so important to get these games back. I think some people that are not in the know of hockey don't understand what the importance of this this year. For one thing, I mean, you got 19-year-olds that were affected last year. I mean, we had one 19-year-old that was phenomenal for us in the first round of playoffs. We get shut down. He doesn't get a scholarship last year because they couldn't watch him continue to play. And then this year for him to get shut down as well again, and now to be back playing, it's so important these guys get exposure. And so, from the minute that we got shut down, our guys just really bought into development. They trained in the gym 6 days a week. We were on the ice 5 days a week, and really took the time that a normal player would probably do in the off season. We were doing right in the middle of the middle of winter. So it was really important for us that we kept the guys engaged, and Tyler and Carter did a phenomenal job of making it fun for the guys. So it wasn't repetitive, the same day, same thing. Where I know talking with some other, teams in other leagues, guys were getting pretty restless of, are we going to play this week? Are we going to play this week? And, are we really going to practice again? And so we had some players that didn't even go home for Christmas. So that's how bought in they were of just development. And then there's the NHL side of things. I mean, the draft, nobody knows what this draft's going to look like and everything, but we had 2 players for us that we had NHL teams calling. And our biggest thing was, getting them exposure and making sure that they didn't have to leave and go to another league that was playing in order for this to happen. And so it's been great to see. I think yesterday's game, we had about 8 NHL scouts at the game, and I wasn't at the game today, but I'm sure there was probably about the same amount. So it's so important for these guys to get this exposure that they need.
Yeah, when it's so competitive too, obviously, right? I mean, there's only so many spots, yet these universities need to fill positions too. So like, do you see have more scholarships gone to areas that we're able to play and we're allowed to keep going just because of the fact that, like you said, well, they can watch these guys? Has that been happening?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I mean, you look at the USHL. They pretty much just kept going right through. They didn't really have anything to shut down to. So I'm sure that there's been more, deals go out to kids that way, just because they were being seen, they were being able to go watch, and NCAA schools can still go watch those games where they can't cross the border right now and get up and watch our game. So it's all on Hockey TV, it's all on Instat, it's all on these on the computer basically how they're watching games. So it's definitely a bizarre time, but and then there's a fallback of the NCAA gave everybody another year. So if you're a senior, you get an extra year of schooling. Now that changes your roster completely, where now you've got guys potentially coming back for another season that maybe you had a recruit that was 19 years old or 20 years old planning to go next year, and now they're getting pushed back a year, or that changes their roster. So that's where I think we've seen the most kind of transitioning of everything, is that some of these guys that were on the verge of getting a scholarship, schools are holding out because they don't know what their graduating class is doing. So it's a learning curve for everybody. There is no formula in any way, shape, or form for what we're dealing with here right now.
Right. And we all know, I mean, of course, there's a product on the ice and people can see and watch that product, but a lot of these things happen because of relationships too. Certain schools like certain teams, or there's certain management that know players or recruiters in different areas, and they really lean on guys. I would imagine now more than ever, with scenarios like that, where the phone gets picked up and says, "Hey, do I take this guy?" Or maybe you're doing the vice versa, or your coach is calling saying, "Hey, this is a guy that we have, and nobody's able to see him, but he needs to be on your team." Like, is more of that happening this year, maybe because of the situation too?
You know what, I think for our situation here in Salmon, I mean, like you kind of mentioned, like Tyler and I are both 30 years old. We're young, and we don't have those 10, 15-year established relationships with some NCAA schools. So for us, it's picking up a phone every single day and calling, whether that's a school, an NHL scout, or phoning everybody just to get whatever they need in their hands, so that they can we can back up what we're saying. I mean, we've got a phenomenal group this year with some guys that have been working as hard as they possibly could to get a scholarship. And it's really just getting that information to those schools and hoping that they trust us from previous guys that we've moved on. I mean, I've been a part of some pretty phenomenal players that come through in my 6 years with the organization, and talking with some of the schools and go, hey, here's an example of a guy that I remember back when he was 18. This guy's the exact same. He's the exact same player. He's the exact same mentality, and trying to really get that, that relationship built with them, saying, hey, I can relate it. I get, you only certain guys that you're going to want, but trying to find that kind of perfect fit for a school. And it's definitely been challenging for sure.
Right. Is that something that for you as an organization and maybe part of your culture is, so some teams focus on winning and the championships and that type of stuff, and others maybe are more focused on the players and having them move on and get the scholarships. Is there one foot in front of the other with that? Like, is that something you guys want to hang your hat on, is that you get players scholarships?
Well, I think we definitely hang our hat on that, just so the fact that last year, I mean, alone, we moved 11 guys on to the NCAA. We're starting to get more and more guys with scholarships already come into our organization, but for the most part, it's been guys that, don't have anything, and we need to help them get that. And so last year was a big year. I think we were in the top maybe 2-3 teams in our league to have that number be in the double digits. And I think that really goes to show the hard work that our staff puts in order to make that happen. But it's also on the players. I mean, the players have to do the grunt of the work with really just being on the ice every single day and improving. And so, that's an important piece, but, kind of answer your question. Like, I mean, winning is obviously it's job security, it's consistency, it's, becoming a better program. And we made a huge jump last year with our program to become third in our division. And, for those who don't know about our division, I mean, it's probably the best in Canada. I mean, the interior division is so competitive every night. Your consistency is such a big thing for us, is that you have to be ready to go every single night, whether you're playing the Pentictons, the Vernons, the West Kelownas, the Wenatchees. Everybody's such a powerhouse team. Even Trail. I mean, Trail was, moved a lot of big players on. I mean, Ken Johnson is probably going to be a top, I think, 5 draft pick here this upcoming year. And so it really just goes to show that the quality of players that our league brings in. And I mean, you look at Penticton, I mean, everybody kind of talks about Penticton as this powerhouse, and, any given night it can go either way. It's just a matter of who wants it more. And they're a skilled team. You have to show show up against those guys, or you're losing no matter what.
Right. You mentioned players coming to the program now with scholarships already in hand. Would that be generally then the U.S. players that you guys bring in that they want to continue their development? They've already been given scholarships, or how would a Canadian player arrive at the program with a scholarship in hand?
Yeah, I think we look at like the CSSHL, for instance. I mean, they've done such a great job adapting to the kind of new era of hockey, and so there's definitely some guys that have either established a conversation with those schools before, and then we're just kind of helping facilitate that and work together on that. But yeah, definitely some Americans. I mean, at the end of the day, Americans, it's a lot easier for them to get an NCAA scholarship just because they're American. It's cheaper for a school to give a scholarship. But I would say it's getting closer and closer to 50% from Canada and 50 from the US. But at the end of the day, it doesn't hurt us. It doesn't sway us away from a kid if he doesn't have a scholarship before coming. If anything, we want to work that much harder to make sure that kid gets one.
Right. How about for you guys? So, I mean, we covered the other end, the players that are on your team, and these guys are trying to get somewhere else, whether it's the NHL or a scholarship, and anxiety is pretty high. But how about you in your chair with your hat on, and you got to make sure you got a team for next year, yet you can't necessarily watch kids play either, and you need to know what kids are doing too. So how are you handling that for the season of 21-22?
Yeah, a lot of it is being on the computer. I mean, watching any games, like, for our US players that have been able to play, it's been easy to be able to tap in and watch their shifts. From in Canada here, it's a little bit different. I know we've, tried to get to some practices when we can and be up away from the team in the stands and trying to be as careful as we can to make sure we're following all the rules. And then it's talking with coaches. I mean, we signed Nathan Mackey, who I know you've had on the show here, and that was a great relationship that we built with Jason Beckett from the Okanagan Rockets, and really it was just communicating back and forth with him. Nathan was a great player that we had back in August, and it kind of the same thing. Like, we got to see everything. It was 5 games before they got shut down, so it's like, okay, you watch those 3-4 times, it gets old, right? You need new content. So I was trying to get some practice footage, whatever that was, in order to watch, and it's adapting. It's kind of the same thing when we got shut down for ourselves. We met and said, okay, how do we scout here? How do we recruit, make sure that we're still, when normally we'd have players fly in, come visit. We'd have players from all over BC, from Canada, come travel to Salmon Arm for a weekend. And, it's a pretty easy sell when a kid comes from, let's say, Toronto area and comes out to Salmon Arm or the Okanagan, and, the drive from Kelowna Airport to Salmon Arm coming through Cal Lake, it's a pretty easy draw where I don't think I've ever had anybody say, wow, this isn't a beautiful area that we live in, and well, I get to play junior hockey here. Like, are you kidding me, kind of thing, right? So it's definitely changed drastically. I mean, I know a lot of Zoom calls when we got shut down last year. It was the same thing. It was Zoom calls for recruiting with the families, with the players, with advisors, whatever that might be to make it work. And a lot of hours of staring at a screen, I guess, and watching hockey.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I guess you just got to find ways to make it happen, right? I mean, you bring up Nathan, which actually maybe is a good story because he really turned your guys' heads. If I got my chronology right, but it was at the camp that he got invited to, and it was essentially a rookie camp, right? Like, with the first one was because he played U15 in that CSSL or whatever, CSSHL or whatever that league is, right? The Academy League. Yeah. You had seen something there. And of course, I mean, a lot of players get a lot of invites, and you're going to different levels there. And I'm not sure when Nathan got invited, and correct me if I'm wrong, if he was like necessarily labeled as a blue chip type prospect, but you went to your first camp and then you did well enough there to get invited to the second one. Is that accurate of the story with Nathan?
Yeah, so I actually I remember watching him last year. I was in Penticton for the CSSHL playoffs, where every league of age group comes there and plays, and it was basically right before we got shut down. I think I watched 2 days of hockey, and then we got shut down right before another game was supposed to start, and so I got to see him there for the first time live. And then our staff invited him to our rookie camp, or our ID camp, which we ended up having to postpone with COVID happening till August. So I think it was like the first week of August we held that camp. And Nathan, what stood out on the page, I remember you and I talking about this, was what stood out for me was his fitness testing. For a young kid, I mean, I think he might have even still been 15 at that time. He blew kind of our mind with how he came in shape and his competitiveness. And so his off ice fitness testing was what kind of jumped off the page for myself, and then backed it up on the ice. And so we invited him, just again, moving into our main camp per se, our top 40 camp is basically what we do. Invited him with a couple other young 2004s. I think we had 1 or 2 05s even there. And the impact that he left with us after that main camp was what really started to get us more engaged with him. I mean, he was definitely competing hard every single day. His consistency was up, and that's something I'm big about is consistency. You have to really make sure that you can play every single day, every time you step on the ice, that you can compete, and that's what stood off the page when at main camp for me. We would have loved to have him in exhibition games just for a young player getting that first chance to play, but then of course with the I think it was what they called it at the time. It was like the pods or the cohorts and everything like that. You couldn't do it. So I basically had to send him to Okanagan and say, hopefully we can affiliate you and get you up in some games. And then just kind of stayed in touch and kind of moved from there. So he's definitely a prime example of a kid that just came to a camp and made an impact, and it's just escalated from there. And obviously now he's a committed player for us for next year, and was able to get into a game a short period of time, but think the world of him, and looking forward to his future with us.
Oh, that's great. And maybe it's good just even to talk about that, because some parents, I mean, well, I shouldn't say parents, but there's different ideas about what these ID camps are. And obviously you guys are a business and you guys need to make some money. And some people think, oh, it's a cash grab, and no one ever comes from the ID camp and will ever make a team, and they just invite everybody in the world. But I mean, that's obviously not the case. You can't fill your entire roster with people from an ID camp, but you might find 1 or 2 guys, right, that you'll invite to main camp and that you want to have an eye on, you want to get a closer look at if they make the right impression. And they do go on and become Salmon Arm Silverbacks, and they do go on to be BCHL players. So would you recommend parents, like, some guys have more than one invite a lot of times, right, to a camp? Sometimes they overlap. What would be your advice to parents handling that or players that are listening, that the ID camp scenario, and where do you go and why do you go there?
Yeah, I think it's something that I did when I was young, and I remember going to camp, if pretty much all May was booked off, where every weekend you were going to some kind of spring camp. I mean, the first piece of it is obviously it's, the ice time availability is, for, I think it's whatever you charge in the $200-300 range, for how much ice you get in, it's pretty tough to get that in a normal, just going and getting some one-on-one sessions. So I think there's definitely a value to it for us in our organization. Like, we've had, I'm going to say in the dozens that we've signed from our camp, and a lot of them are younger players. So if you're a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old really looking to get your name out there, going to a spring camp or an ID camp or a main camp is definitely the perfect opportunity for you. For one, you're playing against older guys, so you're going to see how you shape up against a 19 or 20-year-old that if you were a 16-year-old playing in the BCHL, you'd have to make sure you can compete against those guys. And I think that's what really kind of jumps off the page for the first part of it for young players, is that, okay, here's where I actually stand with older players, and then we've had some 19-year-olds where they come into an ID camp. We've never heard of them, never even seen them before. And, they make an impression, and you invite them back to main camp, and they get some exhibition games in. And we've had, it's nobody's got the same path. Everybody's got a different path and a different kind of formula to get to their journey of junior hockey or whatever it is. And that's really, I think, where those ID camps just kind of give you that opportunity.
Do you encourage or do you field phone calls from, whether it be a player or from a parent, just maybe asking questions about where they lie, or what your interest level really is, maybe, or even what the roster construction looks like for next year? Because sometimes people have questions and they're curious. And I actually, and not to bias your response with this, but I do encourage the players to understand where it is that they're trying out, right? Like, what does the composition of that roster look like? Is this a place where you think that you can fit? Are you a good fit? What's the coach like? So to do their homework, sometimes maybe that might mean talking to a GM. A lot of times it doesn't have to mean that. But do you answer those calls, and do you encourage parents or players to talk or ask questions?
Yeah, I think asking questions if you don't know is important, right? I mean, I can relate to when I was a player. I mean, my 17-year-old year, I went to the Vipers spring camp. I had a great camp. I went to main camp, and now looking back on it, and I think I played 2 exhibition games that year before getting sent back to junior B. And I look back at it going, that was the year that they started making their run where they were a powerhouse. And I look back going, my goodness, like, I was so far from making that organization, really, when you looked at it for just who I was as a player and who they had, it was really something where, I've talked with my parents going, I really wish I would have known. I really wish I would have asked more questions of where did I fit? Was I actually a piece that was considered for that roster? And so for myself and Tyler, that's been something that we've talked about, is we really want to be honest with families, with players. I mean, I've had personal family members that, their kids have come up and obviously had conversations with them, and you're saying, hey, we'll never turn away a player from coming and trying out, but maybe guiding them in a different direction of saying, hey, this might be a better at least starting path for you. And if I can be a guidance for anybody and helping that way, I'm happy to have those conversations. The parents phoning a GM or a head coach and saying, hey, where's my player sit in the roster? Where, it's kind of one of those catch-22s, right? You never want to be that parent that phones and bugs the staff, but at the same time, we're never going to turn away a call and say, hey, we're not going to talk to you. Hey, that's not, we might not tell you exactly what you want to hear, but we also might tell you some information and guidance of how we can help you. And so I think it's finding that kind of that guide and that happy medium that you can really look out for a family and a kid, because at the end of the day, these are just kids. They're kids. It's a business we got to run, but they're kids. They're human beings, and there's more life than just hockey. And it's really trying to help them get to where they need to be.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you mentioned parents and players there, and I work with players on an individual level, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes in a group. And one of the things with my private clients, and depends on the age and where they're at, but like, those discussions are hard, and I really encourage them to have those discussions on their own, right? To stand up, to knock on the door, to pick up the phone, and ask the questions, even like to recruit themselves, to let somebody know that they're interested. Is that something that you think is favorable? And again, obviously, be honest with your answer. Some people don't like the phone calls. For me, I think that does show agency. I think that shows ownership and passion, and that they're capable of handling themselves. And sometimes, like, that's sort of the thing that's really like, wow, that's pretty cool that this kid give me a call. Like, how do you sit on that fence? Do you like when kids would make that phone call?
Yeah, I don't think I'm anywhere in my career that I can turn down phone calls. I think first off, I don't think I've done enough in this world of hockey to be able to say that, hey, I'm not taking phone calls from that. Like, that to me is just, I would rather be a resource for a family and rather have a good, rapport with somebody, rather than just saying, hey, I'm not interested in talking with you, or hey, it's not going to work here, kind of thing. So I'll never turn down a phone call from a family or from a kid. I know, looking back, when, my parents never played hockey when I grew up, and my dad learned to skate when we were learning to skate, my brother and I. And I know Gary Davidson was a prime example of, when I was a stick boy, and I know my parents asked them a lot of questions growing up of just being the junior team before he sold the Silverbacks, and going, what's our road? Junior B was something, as a 16-year-old, I knew nothing about. I just knew that I played hockey and played midget, AAA, whatever that was at that time. And okay, what's the next step? And that's when we asked, Gary for a lot of it, of kind of help with that. And looking back on it, I would definitely wish I would have asked more questions and got to know more stuff, but it's something where you take what you learn, and I'm trying to implement it into what I'm doing here nowadays.
Yeah, I mentioned, that we have that common bond there, or tie, with Gary Davidson. Because, at 15, I played in the BCHL. I don't know if you knew that or not, but I was obviously from Vernon, which you do know. And so there was that decision of, like, trying to make a decision before you really made a team, right? Vernon wanted me to go to their camp. Gary wanted me to go to Penticton. Vernon was in that whole frame where they were always kind of vying for the title, and they would bring in a lot of 20-year-olds at the end of the year and kind of change their composition up when they were going for it at the end. And so we kind of knew that history. And Gary was it was more of a personality thing again, right? Like, it was this, he was really honest. He was really transparent. It seemed like he was authentic in the fact that he wanted me to be there for the season that I was going to be played. And so that was a decision that we went with. I didn't really want to get in an environment where I was trying to compete for ice time with a 20-year-old that was coming in at the halfway point or something. And that decision worked out, really well. Gary did play me. I think I earned the ice time too, mind you, but I did play, and I was there, and it was a good experience, and played in the BCJ. But I remember that at the time, it was hard to navigate. Like, where do you try out? Where do you go? And how do you know if it's the right decision? And obviously you never really do know if you're making the right one, but you just go with your gut sometimes, and it works out. But I think what you and Tyler are doing, like, answering those phone calls, like you say, and being present and being around. I mean, a lot of parents and a lot of players are well, even Nathan, I told you that, like, that one of the biggest decisions was the relationship that he built with Tyler from that camp, and how Tyler talked to him and approached him and communicate with him, and he just felt comfortable going into that environment, so that I think that says volumes, for the comfort level of the people that you're bringing in, and even the culture that you're creating there. So kudos to you guys for doing that. That's job well done. When it comes to that whole parent thing, like the hockey parent, the crazy hockey parent, is obviously that's been out there and it's been talked about. When is too much? Do you think is less more in most of the cases, or where do you feel that lies right now, especially at your level, I guess, at the BCHL?
Yeah, I guess I'll tell a story a bit of my first experience in junior, like when I became an assistant coach with Brandon, and I remember it was maybe an hour after one of our first games, and I'm sitting in the office and a phone rings, and it's a parent, and he's talking Brandon's ear off, basically, of ice time, of where my opportunity for my kid is, and so on and so on. And I remember he hung up and he goes, "Well, that's the first one of the year, and there's probably gonna be a couple more." And I remember sitting there going like, "Wait, you tell me parents actually do this?" Like I was so green to it, I had no idea. And he goes, "All the time." So I remember driving home from the rink that night, I phoned my dad up. I said, like, what did you not call for me? Like, what's going on? Like, I remember going like, you could do that, like, and Tyler and I talk about this all the time, and going like, our parents, it was just, you didn't do it back then, and times have changed so much where you start building those relationships more and more. And personally, for me, it's less is more. I think these kids, when they get to be they're young adults, they should be able to come and sit with their staff. And you kind of mentioned with Nathan, like, we feel our players should be comfortable to be able to sit and say, "Hey, coach, why am I not playing on the power play? Or what do I need to do to get there?" And having those discussions and being able to come and knock on the door and not be just pushing these kids saying, "No, you're just not being good enough." Right. And, I can relate that back to when I played a lot of times. It's like, I look back when I trained in the off season, I went, okay, I was nowhere near doing what I need to do every summer in order to be a high athlete and a high performance player and move on to the next level. And, talking to kids nowadays, it's like just going for a run isn't good enough. Like, you go spend 30 minutes in a normal gym, it's not good enough. Like, there's kids down the road. We live in Salmon, 45 minutes down the road in Vernon. There's a kid training for an hour and a half with a personal trainer, and then going and doing another workout, and then going and spending an hour on the ice. So to me, it's to kind of get back to the parent side of things. It's there's questions to be asked for sure, and I think there's those kind of just not knowing pieces, and happy to answer those ones when it comes to the ice times, the opportunity. What are you going to do for my kid? I think there's such a fine line of when it's crossing too much, and so I would definitely say less is more. But I'm never going to be the one to say, hey, don't call again here, kind of thing. Like, we need to kind of nip this in the bud, kind of thing. It's really just trying to engage and just trying to tell parents, hey, let things unravel and see, like, if you're a Salmon or Silverback, we're always going to have your kid's interest at heart here. If there's ever a trade, it's not just because we're making a transaction. It's because there's a more opportunity for your kid to go play for another organization that he has that spot to fill. Or, if it's a defenseman for a forward, it's going, okay, we needed a defenseman, they needed a forward. He's going to go and get more opportunity, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, they and I would guess that it rarely ever helps, and I would also guess that it would more probably hurt. I mean, like, and I guess it depends on the flavor of the phone call or how often the phone call is again. But, like, obviously parents are well intentioned. They're very passionate about their kid, but you guys got a hard job to do, especially a coach. And when you have somebody in your ear, like, it's hard not to be biased towards the kid in some way when it comes to that too. So I always let parents, like, let your kid go through the door. Let your kid knock on the door if he's not happy. Let him ask the question, or her, obviously, in depending on the league. But I think that's where the respect comes from. I know of me as a coach, I love a player that can come talk to me. I love a player that wants to stand up for himself and for what he thinks, maybe he wants or deserves. I think that's great. Those conversations happen. You know what I mean? And sometimes coaches make mistakes, and it's okay to have those conversations. But you need to get out from under mom and dad's little wing, an umbrella. And a lot of times the players don't even want it, right? But the parents are still involved, and they want to be involved. And I would just say that would be my recommendation to anyone listening is, as much as you want to talk to your kid, if he has the same feelings you have, which is very important as well, then let him go have the conversation. Anyways, moving on. When it comes to getting players in front of you, especially in this year, do you encourage, do you take videotape? Do you want to hear about somebody? I mean, it's tough to have eyes everywhere, I guess, right? Like, how do you go about that with player recruitment and player resumes and that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's starting to happen more and more now here in probably the last 2 years. I think it's more where you're seeing, kids send a highlight video and a resume and references. It's almost coming to like what a job is when you're 16 years old and you're going for your first job at the movie theater or wherever that is. And you're going, okay, here's my references and everything like that. So, we'll never turn them away. I mean, it's for sure something our coaches, that's their job, is to watch. I mean, we had a player do it a couple of years ago. I remember sent in just an email. I actually went to our marketing director, and it turned out to be a stud for us. Like he actually worked out to be a phenomenal player, went on to the college level and is going to be a really good player in the future. And so I don't think you ever can just, throw them in a folder and just, okay, that's it. Like you definitely got to at least look at it, dig into it. I know we kind of chat about like player advisors or family advisors, like that's getting to be more and more here now. As a thing of the future here, and trying to really make sure you have the right relationships with a guy that knows the style of player that you like. And so I'd say it's definitely changed a lot over the last couple of years here for sure. And I think the more kids can get their opportunity to get their information in front of us, the better, kind of thing.
Sure. We have myself, my oldest is 11, and I hear the chatter already, some parents trying to position their kid for the BCHL draft, or where do you get noticed, or where's the right league or the highest profile places to be. One of our listeners here today asked, how well are the BC zone teams, CSSHL teams doing in promoting players with video and contacting you guys? I'll take that one step further and just be like, do you try and have eyes everywhere? I mean, is there places that you do watch more? And then also, I mean, with the Facebook user here too, how well are these teams doing in promoting and bringing people into your league?
Yeah, I mean, my first experience with the CSSHL with the coaches that we've dealt with have been great. I mean, whether it's us phoning to just get information on a player, or saying, hey, what do you have that's something worth watching? They're always promoting their players one way or another to get to our level. Usually our ID camps is where coaches will phone and say, hey, when's your ID camp? I got some kids I really want to get in front of you, and the zone teams too. Like the zone programs, like, I mean, we weren't familiar with them too much before, but they're starting to come more and more where, we've seen kids from Salmon where, they've gone to play it now. So we've started to follow it just from our relationships with minor hockey families here. Mm-hmm. And they've come a long way. I know it's been kind of a transition period for BC hockey in general, but I think they're always promoting their guys. And I think that if you're not with a coach that's promoting you, he's not doing your best interest. I mean, it's like us, we're a development league moving on to the NCAA. We should always be contacting a coach. It's the same thing with junior B. It's the same thing with the midget programs. Is they should always be promoting their guys to the next level. And that's something even with affiliating players, like something that I've never understood in my position is going, well, when we called to ask for an affiliate and a coach says no, it's going, okay, you're not doing that kid's, its best interest. And sure, there's the teams that just call up and he plays 2 shifts a game and sits on the bench, and that doesn't do us any kind of service. But usually when we pull up a kid, he's going to get shifts, and we know that if he's a top player for that team where he'd normally get ice time, but we're going to pull him up, like we want to make sure he's getting in the game and getting that experience, so that when it's next year. I mean, use Nathan as an example again. Like we got him and Jason in the Okanagan Rockets organization in general was phenomenal with that. They were pushing to have him come up and join us, and really trying to do everything they could to make sure that happens. So I think it's definitely, you got to pick and choose your organization that you go to. It's no different than when we're recruiting. It's a family's got to pick what makes sense for them. And I think it's just trying to find that right fit for you, that that you can trust that coach to get you promoted to that next level. Right.
And the league, I mean, I guess I want to be as honest as we can with it, but I do think that there's a little bit of a frenzy about like getting into the CSSHL, like that this is like the holy grail. I do understand that it's a good league. I mean, I think it compares, like the Rockets and that league is comparable. I know that the zone program is obviously a little bit of a step down, but I'm still of the belief, and maybe I'm a dinosaur, and maybe I'm wrong, but like I do think that you can play at the BCHL level coming from all three of those spots, and you don't have to spend $30,000 on a placement to an academy to ensure that happens. Do you feel that way, or is it becoming a spot where we kind of need to be in one of those two leagues to really have eyes on you?
Well, I think it's like I kind of mentioned before. I think there's a formula that's different for every single player. I don't think that two guys are the exact same and need to go the exact same path. I know, like you kind of mentioned, like when I grew up, it was midget AAA. Was you played in your hometown until you're ready to head off to junior, and that was it. And I think POE at the time was like just up and coming. OHA was just kind of coming when I was there, and hearing with these people spending these tens, $20,000, $30,000 for their kid to play 1 year hockey, and it's crazy that the money that's being spent nowadays in hockey in general. So I would definitely say that it's all your own path. We'll always watch games. If there's a kid that's doing phenomenal in a zone midget program or even just a midget AA program, to me, that's where the ID camps just come in perfect situations where, maybe we didn't get out to see, 6-7 games, maybe only we saw him one time and go, okay, like we liked what we saw. He has the stats to back it up in that league, but now we want to see what he does against the CSSHL kids, the junior B players, our returning veteran players, and really see where they fit. So that's where those ID camps, I think, to me, fits perfectly. Is there are families that can't spend even $5,000 a year. It's crazy what some leagues are charging nowadays. Now at the same time, the CSSHL, the major minute, like there is value to it. They get on the ice every single day. There's a structure to that, which I totally respect. But there's families that live on a budget that can't afford the $350 sticks every 3 weeks where a kid's breaking one, right? So it's definitely, I think, where the ID camps can come into play and trying to help those kids get exposure. And for us, it's if a kid's not quite there in junior A level, we're happy to facilitate to find a junior B team where that player can still continue to play, maybe be an affiliate for us, and you never know what happens.
Right. Yeah, no, that's great. Those are great points. With the whole age aspect, do you have any 16-year-olds on your team this year?
Well, we've got two that are with us right now. Yeah. So we didn't have any at the start of the year, but we pulled up one just after Christmas, who was very close. And then Nathan's been with us for the past, 3 weeks here now as well. So we've got two 16-year-olds and we've got 4 17-year-olds.
Is that something that you try to have as part of the composition? I mean, just wondering from a recruiting standpoint now, like, are you recruiting bantam leagues? Are you recruiting only generally the midget age players, or when does that start?
I think nowadays, we actually just had this conversation probably about a month ago that we went, we got to start looking at, almost graduating Pee-wee players of what they're going to do in bantam, because there are the 15-year-olds that make a jump right after 15 to be a 16-year-old in our league, right? So if you're not recruiting, when they're kind of a second year Pee-wee, and you start looking at players and go, at least maybe not having the conversations with the families, but at least keeping an eye on what that player's career path is doing, and do they go to an academy, do they stay in their local minor hockey association, whatever that is, and really trying to just follow that. I think you need to 16 17-year-olds for us is an important piece because they're your future. We try to build 3 years in the making, and so you try to be an opportunity for a 16 or 17-year-old to get in the lineup, get that exposure, and get that kind of feel for what the BCHL is. And then as an 18-year-old, try to make an impact where then a 19-year-old, you're making your mark kind of in the league, and then you're moving on to the NCAA. I think the 20-year-old situation is starting to kind of go a little bit more away. I mean, obviously you have your 20-year-olds that are your leaders and that are kind of like your core group, but I think you'll start to see more and more where the younger kind of transitioning is happening.
Yeah, everything's getting younger. It seems like younger and younger. I think you said you do need the 20-year-olds, and sometimes, I mean, a lot of those 20-year-olds end up fighting and earning those scholarships at that point, if they're in the right organization. And like I said, everyone has a different path, and that's one of the things I've found with this, and I found so interesting in talking to people like yourself and other players, is that just how diverse the path is. I mean, there's no one way for everybody by any stretch of the imagination, and people get to some really high places on these different paths. It's really, really quite inspiring, actually. I like what you said there about the ID camp. So I think that is important. I mean, for parents to hear too, right? Like, you could be in a zone program. You could be doing really well there. You could even be potentially below a zone program. But if you have someone if you are doing well there and you're dominating where you are, you're going to get a chance to go against, the bigger leagues, right? And the players there. And now if you compete there, then you're fine. I mean, that's really the competition ground there, right? When you get on that plane service against everybody, you get to see where it really lies. And obviously you're going to take the best player and the best person available to you. You don't really care where they've played at that point. So yeah, I mean, I am somebody who likes to keep people local where possible. People can save money, keep families together, and not sending them off. I mean, I'm a big proponent of that. Sometimes it's not easy, and it's hard to do, but yeah, I mean, it's just I hate when people think, well, it'll never happen if we don't do this, and you have people making really big decisions, and I'm not sure that they have to do that, but. Let's maybe finish with, and by the way, everyone who's listening, as you know, it's Brooks Christiensen here. If you've just joined late, Salmon Arm, GM of Salmon Arm Silverbacks. If you have any questions, by all means, please ask. I'll finish with, how do people make that impression in camp? When I'm talking to players, there's different ways to do it. One, just out of my own curiosity, is fighting even a thing anymore in camp? Like, is that something that you guys let happen? Does anybody do it? Is it frowned upon? Is it smiled upon? What's that flavor like?
I mean, I think fighting in general, I mean, personally, I'm a fan of it. I think, my brother was a tougher guy. He was a big player that had to fight lots. And, I was never the type of guy, but so I think the game's definitely shifted where fighting's kind of an anomaly now at this point in time. I mean, we have the odd fight in spring camps or main camps or ID camps. It's more or less probably two guys fighting for that position where they know that, they're close and one wants to prove himself kind of more, make their mark. And then there's also the other side where a guy's, sticking up for a teammate or a young kid. I mean, there are 15-year-olds in these camps. And if a 19-year-old goes running over a young kid, I'm sure there's probably another older guy on that same team that's going to stick up for that guy. So to me, it's not something that, maybe the 10 years ago where you'd probably fight 2 or 3 times in a camp just to get your name out there. But to me, the biggest thing that I look for is consistency. Is just really, if you can be, from the minute you step on the ice at the start of camp to the end, and you're the exact same player that entire time, to me, that's what jumps off the page. Goal scoring is great, but there's a lot of players like, you look at a defensive defenseman, they're probably not going to stand out in an ID camp whatsoever because they don't make mistakes, they don't get exposed, and they really just do what they're asked to. And so to me, that's what we really look for is, okay, what are these kids doing in this 5 games, 6 games, whatever that weekend is, and really evaluating on that rather than, I mean, it's great if a kid can score, 15 goals in a camp, there's obviously a value to that. And chances are if they do that, there's maybe a small chance that they can transition that into a BCHL exhibition game where they're going to score goals and do that kind of stuff as well. But to me, it's for one, can they learn? 2 is can they compete? 3, do they come up, come with in shape? How's their fitness testing? We do a lot of fitness testing. That's something that we really look at. And if you come and, you're dogging it and you're tired after day 1, it's pretty easy to see what you've done for the past 3-4 months preparing for those camps or whatever that is. Right. So I think consistency is probably the biggest thing for us, is that we really watch for.
Yeah. Good for you. And I think the one thing that the players, like, I don't know. I mean, I just remember when I was that age, you want to be in shape because you're going to be better on the ice. I mean, that's obvious. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why you're doing what you're doing in the gym and why you're being committed. But for someone like you wearing that hat and that chair, you can improve the physical condition of somebody too, which you guys recognize. But the thing is, it's a telltale sign of like how important it is to them.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that, like, it's almost like a little bit of a recipe card of like what's inside that person. Right. Like, and I think that's the part that the players kind of get or don't get, you know what I mean? Is the fact that this is like this is your resume. This is you and what you care about and how much you're willing to put in, because it is the one thing you can't control as a hockey player, right? 100%. Like there's only so much you can control, and that's one of them. I mean, how prepared are you for this camp? And I mean, I just think you talked about compete, like that fires me up too. I mean, that's what I named my spring team, the Up My Hockey Compete, because you can control that. And you can stand out in a camp because you do that. Like you can't always score goals. You can't always make that perfect play. You're not going to be amazing on your breakout pass all the time. But if you want to compete for pucks and if you want to compete for space in front of the net, that gets noticed. And you can do that every single shift. And it's up to you. So it's that easy, right? Like you can stand out, and then now your eyes are on you, and now you get more looks. Like, I mean, I don't know. I just like that. I get super passionate about that because in this day and age too, when I'm watching the games, like it's because the physicality has gone down. I think in general that it's easier to stand out when it comes to those loose puck battles and stuff. And I think, and who doesn't want a competitive player on their team, right?
No, that's exactly. I think, when we look at it, a camp and everything, it's there's more guys that are just a hardworking third, fourth lines, even in the NHL, you look at it, like there's more guys that are those role players that are energy guys than there are the top ends, the Matthews, the McDavids, the McKinnons, like, there's only so many of those guys, but there's a lot of teams that are made up of those, 3 lines of straight competitiveness in them. Right. And so to me, that's definitely it. You kind of touch on the addition part of it. I mean, you look at a dancer, like they're usually a stage with all eyes on them, and that's their time to audition. It's the same thing. If you compete hard and you're skating as hard as you possibly can every shift, you can control that. You can't control if a puck's going to go in the net every single time, right? So it's something that's super important to us, and I think it's making sure that for us as guys that are prepared, we know that when it comes to a big game, that they've done everything they need to leading up to that weekend to be prepared to play in that game and be competitive.
All right. And you mentioned it a few times, and I'll just echo it because I think it is important in that aspect of consistency for the young players that are listening, because you can have a great game, but what are you going to do the next game, right? Because you might have got somebody to talk about you, but now you might be 2 people watching. If you lay an egg that next game, or even for 5 shifts in a row, like those might be the 5 shifts that somebody's actually watching you. So, I mean, consistency is a big thing for sure. Like to be whatever player you want to be, and whoever you identify yourself as being, be that. And be it all the time, the less ups and downs you have, and especially when you get to the junior level, you get to the pro level for sure. That I experienced that they don't want guys. I mean, streaky scores is one thing, but streaky competitiveness is a completely another thing. And so, you want to be able to ebb those valleys, not have as many valleys and not as many peaks, and be consistent, especially when you're trying to get recruited. So when you're going to camp young guys out there, just be consistent, bring your game every game. And the one way to really catch eyes is just show that you want it more, and that's going to get you some attention. There's one kind of a funny question here. Maybe we'll wrap up with, hey, Brooks, how much does a stick boy in the BCHL get paid? Just asking for a friend.
I think you get quite a few sticks. I think I'll remember back in my days. I know, and it's funny actually. I was talking to somebody the other day about this. Is going like, I remember playing with the 100 flex sticks cut down because I got it from a Silverback, and I was just so pumped. And now you see these, Raven sticks and Bowers coming out with these smaller flexes. So it's not worth it. I'll tell you that right now. It doesn't pay enough.
If that is a true trust, is that a volunteer position? Usually young kid probably wouldn't get paid anything, right?
Yeah. Usually come to the games and be a part of it. Yeah, they're we've had great stick boys over my years, at least with this organization. They're a good piece. I know the guys really like having them around. So it's great for kids to learn, right? I mean, being around the junior atmosphere. I know when I was a young kid, I learned a lot just about how to even present yourself as a player and see what these guys do to prepare themselves for a game. So it's definitely valuable for sure for young kids.
Yeah, well, we talked about it. I think I mentioned the first time we talked with Kevin Peterson, he mentioned it on my episode 1 of my hockey podcast, where that's how he got his foot in the door with coaching. He ended up coaching the Brick program, and he ended up coaching he ended up coaching the assistant coach for the Vipers under Mark Ferner. And he just hung around the rink, he said, in his own minor hockey association. He hung around the rink. He was done playing junior hockey. He got invited on the ice finally, started pushing pucks, and he volunteered, I think he said, for 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 years or something before he ended up got his first paid position. And here he is now as a Western scout for the Phoenix Coyotes, like it's or Arizona Coyotes. I always get that wrong, so like there is something to be said for that though. I mean, if you're passionate about something, be around it, right? And do whatever you can to be around it. And those relationships end up getting made, and people, that's the way the world works, right? I mean, people work with people that they like to work with, and people that have done stuff for them in the past. So you definitely build relationships and you build friendships, and that also builds resumes. So by all means, if that's your friend out there that wants to be, and he's a young kid who wants to get his foot in the BCHL, though, that's a great way to do it. And you get to be around some really good people, get to have some good examples, and you get to be a part of a pretty cool thing. So I would definitely recommend that too. Well, Brooks, that's the hour mark. I think we covered most of it. Is there anything else you'd like to say just about the team, or your team in general, or the league, or why any young local talent should want to come play for the Silverbacks?
No, I mean, I think it just touching base on it one more time. Like everybody's path is different. I mean, you just mentioned Kevin's. I mean, I'm close with Kevin. I know him quite well, and it's my path as well. Like everybody's different. There's guys that get the opportunity. I mean, to go on to play big time hockey in the NHL, and there's guys that never made it and have their own path. And so I think it's just being patient. I think patience is something that's hard to come by nowadays, where families really trust that it's going to happen, and that you just need to go on your own path in order for that to happen, for sure.
Awesome, man. Well, you've been a great guest. Thanks for telling us about what's going on in the BCHL and where it's going and how players can get into it and how you are invested in moving players on. And I know the Silverbacks are definitely growing an awesome name and an awesome brand within the BCHL, and definitely supporting this interior division of holding its head high amongst the hockey world. It's a great place to be involved, and I'm proud to call myself an alumni of the league too. So thanks so much, Brooks, and I look forward to talking with you again. And thanks for everyone who joined today live with us here on Facebook. And also on YouTube. And sometimes we have these lives, sometimes we don't, but we'll have this episode Oz and Up My Hockey episode here in the coming weeks. So if you weren't here live, you're going to definitely hear it on all platforms later. So Brooks, thanks so much again, and good luck the rest of the way.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Cheers.